I hope. Oh, I guess I am. Hi, everybody. What's up? My name is Seth Perler, and this is Sarah Kesty, and we are two human beings in the executive function world, trying to help families, trying to help students who struggle with executive function, ADHD, autism, Asperger's, dyslexia, any sorts of student struggles. Sarah and I are, are doing our own things in the world, and we became friends, and we try our own things in the world to try to be of service to these families and kids. So, hi, Sarah.
Hey, that was a good description.
Thanks. I made it
Yeah.
up.
Well, you wing it well, dude. And it really is true. I mean, that's kind of our life purpose. That's why, we're both coaches and yet here we are like, let's build each other's businesses. Let's help everybody.
Well, and what Sarah and I are going to talk to you about today, really mostly for parents, but teachers and therapists you might be interested in, but is advocacy. So, what we decided to do is make three video or so series. We'll see what happens talking about advocacy. How can you advocate for your kiddo, for your student, for your child, and help them get their needs met? And some of the stumbling blocks to that, what works, what doesn't. So, Sarah, what do we have on the agenda for today? What are people going to learn?
We are learning the power of accommodation. So, what actually works and how it can really transform a school experience for a kid with executive function needs.
What is an accommodation? I guess we should start with what is advocacy. I'll do that. You do what is an accommodation. Advocacy means that your child, whether or not they have a diagnosis, whether or not they have something called an IEP or a 504 or an RTI or some sort of documentation, whether or not that exists doesn't matter. Advocacy means that you believe, as the parent usually, but you might be somebody else advocating, but you believe that your child has a need and you want to communicate to the school about that need so that the need is better met. Your child is better served. Your child gets more out of their education, blah, blah. And is that good enough for a definition of advocacy?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's built on self awareness or awareness of your child's needs. And then adding in the piece of like those small changes or the things that can happen to make their academic life better.
And those things are called accommodations. So give me a definition of accommodation. You just kind of did, but
I know I just kind of did. So
why do we use that word?
it's legalese. So you'll notice in when Seth was describing 504, IEP, RTI, like MTSS, like any sort of combination of letters and numbers, you will find it in education. And we're sorry for that. Slow us down. I actually have a resource for kind of the alphabet soup of it that maybe we can post here too. It's flashcards so that parents can be empowered to understand. But the big point is that you don't actually need any of that official stuff for advocacy. When you do have those official plans, however, that's when you can make accommodations. And accommodations are just small changes to how you receive learning or how you show your learning that can really make a big impact because it kind of addresses some of the needs that we know come along with executive function needs.
Excellent. Yeah. So we accommodate a need, right? So excellent. So yeah, we can use some simple example like guitar is my favorite thing. If we were trying to accommodate, if I was trying to teach a very young child guitar, I might accommodate them by getting a smaller guitar. You can actually get smaller guitars. That might be an accommodation. That's just a basic, just to make it super concrete. So, but we're doing this obviously in the classroom. And Sarah is a teacher, and I was a teacher for 12 years. And then we work with families now, so we really understand this from different angles. So, as far as our agenda today, we were going to talk about the power of accommodations. So, where do we go
Right.
from here?
So I just kind of want to open with a story, if that's okay with you, because our brains, we're social creatures. Our brains learn from narratives, especially teenagers. So I wanted to kind of open with a story of a student, and I will call him Dylan. I'm just pulling out of my brain here. And Dylan was a student who had significant behaviors in class. So he would leave class without permission. He might get really grumpy and almost kind of rude with teachers. And when we just scratched the surface, what we found was that he was needing a way to self advocate, so to speak up for himself, but also he had unmet academic needs that were turning into behaviors, which is why I put the air quotes on it because it was almost like self-preservation, right? Like I'd rather be naughty than vulnerable. I'd rather look aloof or like, oh, I don't care, kind of push back than like, oh, I don't really get it. Can you explain it again? I mean, this is a high school student. You don't, it's a little bit socially dangerous to have that vulnerability. It takes a lot of courage and self-awareness and self-actualization that, developmentally isn't real accessible at 15, 16. So the parent was just probably at her wit's end because she's like, my kid is a lovely human. I don't know what's happening. There's a lot of that. And they knew he had ADHD. So we were kind of looking at like back end stuff. What can we do at home to help him catch up? Blah, blah. Turns out when we really looked over the assessments and we really had him reflect on some of the patterns he noticed in class, it was that when he became so lost, it was pretty predictable. Within 5 or 10 minutes, he was going to blow out. And when he realized that, he's like, oh, maybe I need a situation where I'm not so lost. So we leaned into his IEP, which he had, which is the special ed component of those laws that help students with disabilities. And we looked at, maybe some co-teach classes where he had a special and a general educator together. And we added some accommodations like the opportunity to take a picture of the board so that he didn't have to remember to write down the homework or whatever, whatever it was that really helped him kind of close the gaps for himself. And I swear to you, Seth, he's doing A's and B's. He's no longer blowing out of class. And he actually he has a life now. He's doing social things. He's doing community service. He's going to the gym. He's just so happy and fulfilled because those needs were met through his self-awareness and our collective advocacy on his part. And he attended his own meeting too. So this is kudos to pseudonym Dylan for getting that across as well.
Excellent. Yeah, and I want to kind of wrap that up by saying that part of the problem here is the misunderstanding, that it's a behavior problem. That sort of misunderstanding, obviously, if we perceive it as a behavior problem, we are going to respond or intervene differently, when what we really needed to do was understand rather than misunderstand in this situation. So that's what accommodation does, ideally, is to help make aware, what the need is, have a real understanding of what's going on beneath the surface, so that we can support them. So where do we go from here?
So you might be wondering, like, okay, so my kid has these needs. What do I do? So we're just going to talk broadly. I'm going to walk you through in the next video session how to advocate, how to acquire or hone these plans, depending on where you are in the process. But right now, it's just kind of thinking globally. So like Seth was saying, kind of stepping back in perspective and thinking what I like call the detective perspective. So what am I noticing in terms of what shows up on the back end as behaviors, which could actually be manifestations of missing skills? And if I watch, how can I uncover what could be missing so that then I can match it up with an accommodation? So I briefly gave you the example of being able to take picture of the board at the end of class so that that accommodates some of the note-taking challenges, because we know with executive function, your kid might show up and be like, oh yeah, I didn't take notes, whatever. When really that's like a front for, yeah, note-taking takes so much executive function. I have to manage my working memory, fight with all the sensory things that are kind of taking up space in my working memory. Keep
Attentional
it, yeah.
processing.
So there's attentional, there's processing, there's the, like the whiteboard in your brain, your working memory. There's metacognition, thinking about your thinking. What did I understand? There's auditory processing, where you're hearing what the teacher's saying, making it make sense, encapsulating it, like encoding it to be memorized. Prioritizing. So what did the teacher say that I actually need to write down? What was more of like a side note? How can I tell? Did the teacher give me any clues for upcoming tests? Did they pepper in something about like a certain test date, you know, and by the way, you have to maintain this for 20, 30, 40 minutes
Mm-hmm.
on top of all the physiological things of sitting for so long. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, welcome to the student club. That's that note taking is a bear for our executive function. And so some of the accommodations, so when we think backwards to like matching up the need with the accommodation, some of the accommodations for that are making available the teacher's notes or like just a copy after class or allowing photos now that we all have small cameras in our possession at all times. It's an amazing tool for that. But sometimes you need permission. So having that be an official accommodation is helpful. Having a peer take notes on carbon paper where you get the second copy. And I want to address kind of a potential elephant in the room right now, in that as we talk about accommodations, sometimes parents are like, well, then my kid will never learn how. And really, truly, what this is backup so that they don't have academic penalty while they are gaining the skills. So your kid who gets accommodations for note taking is still taking notes, but we've got the backup just in case we had like a blip in attention, or maybe they wrote down like something entirely not priority for the teacher, but they didn't pick up on the cues, um, you know, things like that. So it's not enabling, it's not taking away the opportunity to grow. It's empowering them with tools so that they can grow in a way that is scaffolded enough that you're not just trying to, you know, learn to swim by being dropped from a helicopter into the ocean.
Awesome. And I'm really glad that you said the word scaffolding because parents, the example that Sarah used, you can use any example you want. And of course, the point isn't to be doing the notes for the kid. When you have a great teacher, when you have a teacher who knows how to differentiate and who knows how to scaffold, meaning you take them from where they are and baby step them forward so that they are building the skills. When you have those sorts of teachers or educational environments, they are they are accommodating for those things. I mean, you know, a lot of teachers are brilliant. They're accommodating for all the needs, you know, anyway, just because they're seasoned teachers, they really are really good at looking at, you know, what's going on in the classroom. But as classrooms get bigger and bigger and there's less and less resources and so on and so forth, it can make it very hard for them to know what to do. But either way, I want to leave you with that concept of scaffolding, parents, that when you're thinking, what does my kid need? You can really think of it, where are they at now and what's sort of the next level, next level, next level in any particular area with it where they might need an accommodation. And this is such a great example with the note taking because there really are kids, high schoolers, college kids that really don't have the skills or the executive function or whatever to auditorily process information and kinesthetically take notes and whatever ever other sorts of skills are needed, like to do all those things at once. You know, for some of us, it's like the what is it, rubbing your stomach and patting your head type thing,
Not going to happen.
times 10, right? So, and when we misunderstand it and think of it as they're just not trying, they're not working hard enough, and all these sorts of shaming messages, they just need to be more motivated, disciplined. You know, we are really missing out on how to serve them. So just wanted to again reiterate that concept of scaffolding because I think it's so important. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
I know it's a very, very clear opening to the soapbox that you and I both occupy. But you know, it's true. It's really, really true. And I don't mean to tongue in cheek it as like soapbox that is not important. I think it's so important that we're very like baited by the opportunity to say, hey, listen, what looks like behavior is actually skill deficit. And once you flip it, it's so empowering. And so that's kind of the second thing I wanted to share about accommodations is you as a parent, you as a student don't always know what will work. And so when you're kind of like, if you're in a Hail Mary situation, or maybe you don't have the 504 yet, or the team's kind of taken their time to get the assessment done, no shade on the school team, by the way, because it takes a long time. But you know, you're kind of in that moment where you need the help now. one way to kind of empower everybody with accommodations, or at least the mindset, is to just share some of the vulnerable needs, some of the perspective, because that unlocks everybody's thinking like, oh, well, if I know it's tricky for you to keep up with the pace, like I kept a notebook of my notes in each period. And if you repeat a period, you've got old notes. I would just slide it to the kid that I knew had a hard time keeping from the board to his notes and back. And I would just give him my notes and away he'd go. It was like magic. And this was the kid who would like use bad words in class, who would like hit others so he'd get kicked out. I mean, we're talking serious behavior manifestations from this skill deficit. So, and again, that's funny. It's a note taking example, but the idea is because I knew of the deficit, I was able to wing it as a teacher and provide those things. And sometimes kids are able to ask for those things. So again, it's like once you're kind of taking that detective perspective of what could I be missing, and you share it with the teachers in an empowering way where they're part of the discussion, it can kind of close the loop faster than waiting for the school wheels to spin to systemically get them the support that they need.
Yeah, and this is such a good example, and we can kind of wrap up just continuing to use this example because we'll give you the example, but you can apply it to all sorts of different places where accommodations are needed. But when I was a teacher, one of the things that I would do is make the outline with the fill in the blanks for kids. And another thing is that you will find that some teachers are very rigid and inflexible and will say things like I can't do anything if I don't have the 504 and the or the documentation. And then even if they have it, they can be very literal about it, where Sarah just said, you don't necessarily know until you try. So being super literal about it does not solve the problem of serving that child. But as a teacher, teachers can, let's say, make the outline and they can offer it to the whole class. Like you can actually say to the whole class, hey, does anybody want the outline sketch? It'll help you take notes more easily. And anybody who wants them can, without any shame, say, yeah, I'll take them. Yeah, thanks, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
B. And pass them out for whoever wants them, or have them in the front of class or whatever. So you can actually offer this to anybody who wants it, and the ones who don't won't take it. And and you can even have more detailed outlines where it scaffolds even more, so you can have two versions. And some teachers might be like, oh, well, that's a lot of work. Well, not really, because we're actually doing the work anyway. I mean, you can replicate your document 3 times and take off some in one and more in the next, and then now you have 3 versions of it, your own version, and then the 2 other versions. And for some students, you can give them the entire version, if they really are struggling. And one more thing with that is you can give it to them early. And for parents who are like, yeah, but we have a teacher, the teacher's never going to give it to us early, they're not going to give us any outline, it's the end of the year or whatever, and we know we're not even going to get it, I have an idea for you. And this is something that I do with a lot of my students. But when you can figure out what the topic is or the unit of study, whether it's math, science, social studies, reading, writing, whatever, when you can figure out what the topic is, the unit, the what they're studying, what the content is, you can go to any number of great YouTubers who are doing things at developmentally appropriate levels for your child. You can find a video or two, because there's so many people who teach something in sort of a 101 style. Like, let's say it's igneous rocks, or let's say it's the rock cycle. I'm just pulling things out of thin air, or let's say it's a long division. You can find resources and show your kid that proactively before they have to take notes on it. Like, if the unit is on such and such a topic, you can actually help plant those seeds, which gives them a little bit of foundation, so that when they go into class and the teacher starts, like in Charlie Brown, wah 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 wah, and they can decipher that better and take better notes, and take in more of the learning. So
Yeah, it's like kind of building hooks upon which they can put classroom learning on. That it's a memory trick. It's a great idea. Can I give 2 hot tips before we wrap?
let's do it.
Okay. Um, 2 things. So, as you are working on becoming a parent advocate or working with someone like me who helps you advocate, a couple of things you really want to like watch for. This is kind of insider knowledge. The first thing is don't depend on the team to generate all the ideas. come with a list, and you can even organize it again by need. So my kid has a hard time with attending. Well, here are some accommodations that would meet that need, kind of matching it up, if then sort of style. But have a list ready, because usually the meetings are like stacked back to back where you have pressure to just get in, get out. Not you, but the school team does. And so they're going to offer you like their favorites, their quick and easy list of preferential seating, maybe extended time on tests,
Exactly.
private place to take a test, bada bing, bada boom, you're done. So, and yes, some of those are helpful and some of them do match needs, but there's a whole realm of accommodations available that match executive function deficits that aren't necessarily going to be offered by the school team, but are still legal and, great options. So it's, as your job as a parent is and an advocate, is to kind of look backwards and see what's available. And then secondarily, be so super careful with the wording that none of the accommodations go into any document as requested by student or as previously agreed to with teacher, because that relies on their executive function to think ahead of time, like psychic children, to pre self advocate for an accommodation that they may need. And let's be real, if that was within their like skill set currently, it's not yet, it will be, but if that was current, we wouldn't need the 504. So just be super careful, because sometimes schools put the onus on students when it's pretty inappropriate. Students don't yet have the skill set to self advocate, and it needs to be something that's kind of a shared responsibility between the school staff and the student.
Excellent. I mean, that's one that drives me nuts when the teacher says, well, the kid was supposed to advocate for themselves and ask for it. And it's like, if they could, they would. They do not have that skill set yet. So that's a very frustrating one, because I really only see that with that rigid type of teacher, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that inflexible personality. And it just drives me nuts, because it doesn't have to be that way. So that I'm really glad you pointed that out.
100%. Yeah. And you'll notice too, like, because the school year cyclical, I mean, I know you teach your listeners about the dip. The school year cyclical for teachers too. So around about April, May, where we're recording right now, everybody tired. So
Everybody's tired.
the teachers who started off very open and flexible are kind of being funneled into that space. So just be prepared for, reminding the teachers of accommodations before testing and things like that. Like, teachers are human,
Yep.
which I don't know why I did the robot right there.
Yep. Yep. And we'll talk more about that in the next one. But yep, they really, they can't just read a ton of IEPs at the beginning of the school year and then dive. If you're not a teacher, you have no idea what goes into teaching. I mean, they work so hard, but when they don't know the kids and get a bunch of the stuff at the beginning of the year, they cannot memorize everything. So giving them a kind reminder of how to be helpful.
Definitely. And we can teach you how next time.
All right. All right, everybody. I'm Seth Perler with SethPerler.com and ExecutiveFunctionSummit.com. I run a summit. And this is Sarah Kesty. Where can people find you, Sarah?
SarahKesty.com and IEPOMG.com. And I have the IEPOMG and Executive Function podcasts.
Oh, yes. All right, everybody. Check out our podcast, my YouTube, whatever you want. Have a great day. Go connect with your child. Take care.